I was thinking about apocalyptic movies lately. We were just watching one last week or so, and I wanted to share with you guys some interesting things that I've been thinking about through a coaching lens, through understanding the brain and understanding stress and fear through apocalyptic movies.
Welcome! Here is your hostess and coach, Chandra Zas, helping people make food and mood changes doable without missing out. Go ahead, high five that like button, subscribe and share while you're there.
So in the beginning of the pandemic, we were in Spain and we went to visit our friends in this amazing village called Azcarate in the north of Spain. We were supposed to stay for 2 nights. We ended up staying for 7 months because of the pandemic. It hit. And in the first few weeks, our suitcases were packed and we were waiting for our next flight. I think we had like 5 flights in a month or something. They all kept getting canceled. And we were in this, like most people, like heightened state of like, what's going to happen, unknown, uncertain, like, what all of us went through. We were just happened to be in this little village in the north of Spain. And we started watching movies. So after our little one would go to sleep, we started watching these apocalyptic movies. And my partner actually really loves apocalyptic movies in general. I remember when we were pregnant and we were watching an apocalyptic movie called The Road, I believe it's called.
Hello, my friend. How are you? I'm in the Dead Sea, floating in the water. Go ahead and like and share and follow so we can keep in touch.
I never even finished that movie because the scene, if you've seen this movie, there's a scene with a basement. I won't go into the details, but this scene has stayed with me and pops up into my mind consistently now for over, I guess, about exactly 4 years right now. So we have a history of apocalyptic movies, but when the pandemic hit, our apocalyptic movies increased and it felt like we were watching like one every night. And after a few weeks, I realized that I felt like this was really not good for me. I was waking up in the middle of the night and I was scared and I was thinking about the scenes and I felt this fear and stress, and I could feel it in my body and I could feel that it was stopping me from sleeping, and I could throughout the day I wouldn't be thinking of the movie, but the movie would pop in my mind. It was like I was replaying scenes of the movie and I was feeling those feelings of scared, and I was fascinated by at some point I told my partner, I was like, I can't watch these. These are not good for me. This is having a negative effect on me. And he was like, yeah, really? He's like, I really like them. And I was like, what? And I was thinking about it. I was thinking how can he enjoy these movies and I feel like I'm being negatively affected by them? So I was thinking about it, and at the time I was deep in coaching school and I was really learning about how the mind affects us and how what we think about things affects how we feel. And so I started thinking about it in reference to apocalyptic movies. Having this experience where we're watching the exact same movie and I'm feeling freaked out and I'm losing sleep and I'm feeling stressed and scared, and he's finding joy and pleasure. And I was like, wow, what is going on? What is the difference between him and I? And so I started asking him questions. I'm like, so how do you enjoy, I didn't even really know which question to start with. How do you enjoy these movies? What do you like about them? I was asking kind of in the dark questions. And then at some point, I don't remember exactly how the question answer happened, but I realized that he was imagining himself as the hero, as the person in the movie who was prevailing, who was overcoming the apocalyptic mayhem trouble. And I was imagining myself as the victim, as the person who was extremely suffering, the person who was being killed, the person who was being tortured. I was imagining myself as the victim, and he was imagining himself as the hero. And I just had this crazy light bulb in my head. I was like, oh my gosh, him thinking of the movie this way, seeing himself as different characters versus me seeing myself as the victim characters, had this profound effect on how we were feeling about the movie. So of course I was the one that was scared and stressed and losing sleep, while he was enjoying overcoming these crazy moments in these apocalyptic movies. So fast forward a few years, almost 2 years, and just last week we were watching another apocalyptic movie, and I made it all the way through the movie, but I was like stressed after the movie. I was like feeling like really yucky in my body, and I could feel this, like, it felt really, really uncomfortable. And so I was kind of thinking about it, and we decided to talk a little bit after the movie, and I kind of continued the conversation that I'd started 2 years ago with him. And I was like telling him my experience of how like these like images keep coming back to me, and the storylines keep coming back to me. And like there's this one scene from The Road had been like continuously coming back into my brain for 4 years. And he had this really interesting insight, which I totally love, because it's the same insight that I help my clients with, is he said, well, if these things keep coming back to you, he's like, why are you still resisting them? Because I told it what I told him. I said, you know, these images pop into my mind, and then I have to immediately like refocus my brain and go somewhere else. And he picked up on that, and he realized that what I was doing is that I was resisting this thought and this feeling. And he said, well, why don't you just like accept that that is a possibility, that that is potentially part of life? Like there's nothing gone wrong that these horrific things happen. Because I was sharing with him that part of, for me, what's so horrific is that I think anything that we can imagine is possible, and that even if something's maybe not a true story, there's some variation on it out there. There's some level of crazy suffering, crazy pain, you know, tragedies. There are crazy things happening in the world. And for me, that's partly why apocalyptic movies feel so intense and scary, is part of me believes that these are all possible, and even some version of them are happening. So I feel this intense connection to these stories. And he gave me this insight of like, well, next time these, you know, these visuals and these scenes from the movie pops up, like, why not just relax into them and breathe into them and believe that they are part of life, that that is possibility, instead of creating all of this continuous resistance and trying to not process that feeling and that possibility. It blew my mind, because I mean, this is what I get to do with my clients and coaching all the time. Like that resistance to is often what's harming us more than the actual feeling of feeling the sadness, feeling the grief, feeling the pain, feeling those negative, hard feelings that most of us resist. So I was like resisting those about the movies. And he gave me the insight of like, well, just let go of the resistance, and like, it's okay that your brain has those thoughts. Like it is a potential, it's a possibility. Like, and it totally shifted these scenes popping up in my head, these apocalyptic movies popping up in my head. Now I'm like, when they pop up now, and actually they're popping up less since I've been doing this, since he gave me this idea a couple weeks ago, I've been breathing into them and just allowing them to go through me, which is exactly what I teach my clients with negative emotions. And now they're not happening as much. Like it's this resistance that's actually the problem. So I know that this isn't exact, I mean, it's not exactly food and mood, but it is food and mood, because when we think about our mood, when we think about stress, when we think about negative emotions, it can be in anything in life. It can be in our relationships, it can be in movies, it can be in many places. And so I just had this like hilarious epiphany in my own mind, my own reality. I have a new lack of resistance to apocalyptic movies and apocalyptic scenes popping up in my brain. Kind of wild, kind of cool. So I wanted to share this with you guys and offer that if there's something that you're struggling with, maybe it's an apocalyptic movie, I don't know, maybe it's someone in your life, maybe it's a situation in your life. Like the first piece is, if there's resistance, to let go of the resistance. That is the magic answer towards decreasing the unnecessary emotional suffering. Hope that wasn't too many coaching terms for you guys. Apocalyptic movies, they're possible. That's what's really crazy. And I feel like during this pandemic, I actually remember seeing that in the beginning, that Netflix, the apocalyptic movies were like really on the rise. I think all of us were kind of like, it was part of is part of our reality. Wild world we're living in. I hope you have a beautiful day, and thank you very much for your time and attention.